This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
I want to thank Mrs. Goldman for giving me the opportunity to join you this afternoon. I want to thank Mrs. Rosenthal for helping make this connection. And Achron Chaviv, I want to welcome my mother-in-law who's here today. If I may, I would like to dedicate this afternoon's learning Leila Nishmas, Fega, Bas, Rav Moshe Aaron, Nesham Sham and Aliyah, should be a Meil Tzoshar for all of the kinder in Einiklach, Ad B'Yaskel Tzedek. Okay, Leil Seder, the night of the Seder evokes very warm memories in everybody's heart. There's something magical almost about the night of the Seder. The Kedusha, the holiness is tangible. The painters have tried to capture on canvas a little bit of the glory, the majesty of the Seder table. You have Yidden who are so estranged from Judaism that they don't even know Shema Yisrael, but they do know Ma Nishtana Halayla Hazeh Mikol Halaylos. You know the story of the Englishman living in London. He's a great literary giant, and one day he gets word from the Minister of Protocol that the Queen of England is going to place her royal scepter on his shoulder, and he's going to be invited to a procession, and she's going to put the scepter on his shoulder, and he's going to utter the Latin phrase, and he's going to be knighted. And he's practicing this phrase so that he could recite it with confidence, and he has this phrase down like nobody's business. Vayehi hayom, and the day comes, and he's standing before the Queen, and she's about to put the royal scepter on his shoulder, and his mind freezes. He forgets the Latin phrase. So he figures he should probably try to say something in a different language, something that sounds Latin. So out of the deep recesses of his childhood memories, he says, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylos. The Queen is perplexed. She turns to the Minister of Protocol. Why is this night different from all the other nights? Wow, not bad. Good audience, not bad. So, what an excellent question. Why is Pesach so different from all the other nights of the year? That's a very important question. Let's ask ourselves. In fact, the night of the Seder is very, very different from all other nights of the year. If we were to focus and pay attention to how many mitzvahs we perform the night of the Seder, so you have on your sheets, we say many times the night of Pesach in the Haggadah, the Pasuk, V'higadeto levincha b'yom ha'hulemar ba'avur zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeisi miMitzrayim. Ba'avur zeh, because of zeh. Zeh has a numerical value of 12. Says the Avudraham, one of the Rishonim, one of the great classic commentaries on the Siddur. The Avudraham says, Ba'avur zeh, because of 12 mitzvahs that we perform the night of the Seder, the Ribono Shalom took us out of Mitzrayim. What are the 12 mitzvahs? The Daled Kosos, that's 4. Charoises is 5. Karpas, Avudraham, is 6. Netilas Yadayim, 2 times, 8. Hamoitzi is 9. Matzah is 10. Maror is 11. And Kairech is 12. 12 mitzvahs the night of the Seder. It's an amazing thing. There is no other time of the entire year that we perform and squeeze so many mitzvahs into one opportunity. You know, even if a man comes to shul, talis, tefillin, Shabbos even, how many mitzvahs do we ever do at one time? There are very rare opportunities that we perform 3 mitzvahs at the same time. Maybe Sukkot day, you have Sukkah, you have Daled Minim. The night of the Seder, there are 12 mitzvahs that we perform. An amazing thing. Why? Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylos. Why do we squeeze so many mitzvahs into the night of the Seder? But actually, the Chida, Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai asks, it seems that Avudraham forgot about the most important mitzvah of all. What's the most important mitzvah of Leil Seder? The Sipor Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's the beginning of the pasuk. V'higadeto lebincha b'yom ha'hulemar ba'avur zeh v'higadeto lebincha. Why did the Avudraham omit the most obvious mitzvah we perform the night of the Seder, the mitzvah of Sipor Yitzias Mitzrayim? And the Chida explains that the Avudraham is only enumerating mitzvahs maisiyos, mitzvahs that we perform with action, but he's not counting mitzvahs that involve dibur, speech. But certainly Sipor Yitzias Mitzrayim would be another mitzvah that we could add to the list. In fact, if we were to count up all the mitzvahs that we do the night of the Seder, all the mitzvahs, all the maisim, all the minhagim, all the brachos, all the mitzvahs, even with dibur, how many mitzvahs would there be? So, no extra charge. If you look on your sheet, look at number 3. The Reb Shlomo Brevda, in his Sefer Leil Shimurim, he says he heard from an Ish Tzaddik, Reb Yosef Shloimeh, formerly who was a Rebbe in Mir, who heard from Rabbi Chanan Wasserman Hashem Yimkom Damai, that we have a tradition from the Vilna Gaon that the night of the Seder we perform 64 mitzvahs. Half of a fella. 64 mitzvahs the night of the Seder. And the question is, why do we perform so many mitzvahs the night of the Seder? Any other time of the year, 1, 2, 3, 12, 64 mitzvahs. So imagine you could have somebody, he walks into the night of the Seder, he's in the red, or she's in the red. That means they have more Averos and mitzvahs. Imagine somebody came to the Seder with 1,000 Averos and 950 mitzvahs. You know, their fate doesn't look good, and by the time Leil Seder is over, they're in the green. 64 mitzvahs. Why so many mitzvahs the night of the Seder? Not Sukkot, not even Aseres Yimei Tshuva, not Rosh Hashanah, not Yom Kippurim. No other time of the year are there so many mitzvahs. Manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylas. Let's examine a little further. Let's talk a little bit about chametz. I want to speak out a few interesting halachos, important halachos, just to give us the proper context of the Isra of chametz. Let's say, for example, you're in an office, and the co-worker, who's a Gentile, takes out his treif sandwich. And he's eating chazer on one end of the table. Are you allowed to eat your kosher sandwich on the other end of the table, on the same tablecloth, on the same placemat, with no interruption at all? Yeah, it's mutter. Is it better not to? No, it's not better not to. What if he's sitting right next to you? His food is like an inch away from yours. Is that mutter? Absolutely. There are no restrictions. When it comes to treif, there are no halachos of harchakos, of heker. You're allowed to eat kosher food if somebody's eating treif food on the same table. But, what if you're eating milchiks? Yeah? And somebody's eating fleishiks next to you. Are you allowed to eat milchiks somebody's on the same table?
No.
You're not allowed to. You have to have either a separate tablecloth or a separate placemat. Or what you could do is you could put anything down on the table to serve as a heker to remind you. Now, what's the difference? Why is milchiks more chamor than treif? And the answer is very simple. It says in the Yordesim Teiches, the Shach and Sivkatan Beis, the Shach says that the difference is that when it comes to treif, what are we worried about? You're going to take from the other person's food? Why would you take from the other person's food? You don't eat it the whole year. You won't forget. You won't be absent-minded. If someone's eating treif, you know not to eat it, so you could eat on the same table. But if somebody's eating milchiks, someone's eating an egg and cheese, and you're eating a salami sandwich, normally you would eat egg and cheese. It's just now it happens to be your fleishik. So what we're afraid you might forget and take a little piece of their sandwich and take a bite since you're eating next to them. And therefore we require a heker, we require a reminder so you don't partake of the other person's sandwich. But what is the halacha when it comes to chametz? For instance, you're in Great Adventures, and there's a table there, and someone's eating chametz on the table. Are you allowed to eat your matzah on the table at the same time, with a separate tablecloth, and a heker, and a separate placemat? You're not allowed to. What if the table is 10 miles long, and somebody's eating chametz on the other end of the table, and you're eating matzah on this end of the table? You cannot eat anything if someone is eating chametz at that table. It's amazing nafkamina, amazing difference in halacha. That chametz is more chamor than chazer. It's more chamor than basar b'chalav. It is the most chamor isser in the entire Torah. Why is it so chamor? The answer is like this. We're afraid that if someone's eating chametz at the table, the wind may blow and blow one crumb of chametz into your food. And the halacha is on Pesach, chametz is not even batel b'mashahu. Which means if one crumb of chametz falls into a chicken soup, and the size of the vat It's 500 gallons. The entire soup has to be thrown out. What's the halacha if the wind comes and blows a little milk onto your sandwich of salami? What do you do with the sandwich? Es gesundheit. It's a big skula, by the way. It's batel b'shishim. The Bnei Yissaschar writes, it's better to eat fleishiks that a little milk accidentally got mixed into than even matzah on Pesach. What's wrong? It's batel b'shishim. In fact, they could market such a thing. There's a whole, al pi Kabbalah, there's a big inyan. The thing is, you can't intentionally do it. If you do it, ein mevan l'nisel chachila. But if you could find something that Isser fell in, it's not even better not to eat it. Or what would happen if a little bit of chazer fat fell into your soup? Eskes and tehid. It's batel b'shishim, not chametz. Chametz is not even batel be'elef. If one crumb of chametz falls into your food on Pesach, before Pesach, by the way, it's batel. It's batel b'shishim. On Pesach, chametz is not even batel be'elef. So what's the pshat? Why is chametz so chamor that it's not even batel be'elef? I'll give you another example, very interesting. So you buy a house from a guy, and you know that Tony, who you bought the house from, he loved Burger King. Are you required, before you move into the house, to get down on your hands and knees with a flashlight and search in the radiators for little pieces of leftover Burger King? Right? Bedikas treif. There's no such mitzvah. I'll give you another. Let's say you move into your new house and Tony left you his couch, and you're jumping on the couch, nobody was looking, and out comes treif. Out comes treif. What do you do with the treif? Do you bring it to like a big bonfire and throw it in and burn it? Of course not. You throw it in the garbage. There's no halacha of sreifas treif. There's no halacha of bedikas treif. There's no halacha that treif is not even batel. There's no halacha you have to be mevatel kol tarfus v'tarfus sheyesha. No. And yet when it comes to chametz on Pesach, there are 7 chumros that we have on Pesach that do not apply by any other isser in the Torah. The Chidah enumerates, you should have it on your sheet, the Chidah enumerates in number 10, in the second paragraph, 7 chumros that you have on Pesach by chametz that you do not have by any other isser in the Torah. And the question is, Ma nishtana ha-isser shel chametz mikol ha-issurim shabbatayra. You have an isser, the Chidah says, you have to check for chametz, bedika. You have to search for it in the cracks and the crevices. You have to be mevatel the chametz. You have to render it ownerless. You have to burn the chametz. Chametz is also even b'mashahu, which means it's not even batel on 1,000. You're not allowed to see the chametz. You're not allowed to, if somebody found chazer in their house, do they have to take a big pot and cover it over? There's no halacha bal yirah, there's no halacha bal yimatzeh. You just get rid of the isser. Why is chametz so much more chamor than any isser in the entire Torah? So this is the question of the Radbaz. Who's the Radbaz? The Radbaz was born in 1480. He was the Rebbe of none other than the Arizal. So in 1492, the Radbaz was among the Gerushei Sfarad, and the Radbaz wrote more than 2,400 shuvos to all over the world, to as far as India. It's very interesting, in the times of the Radbaz, there was a little bit of a problem that during Chazaras Hashatz, not people were talking, nobody would ever do that. People were not listening carefully to Chazaras Hashatz. So the Rambam was mevatel Chazaras Hashatz. And the Radbaz was the one who reinstated Chazaras Hashatz. The Radbaz, the Rebbe of the Arizal, is the rabbi in Cairo for over 40 years. And the Radbaz is struggling with this question. Why is chametz so much more chamor than any isser in the Torah? So he tries various possibilities, and he says, well, maybe we have to be very machmer when it comes to chametz. What's the punishment for the consumption of chametz? It's isser kares. That's the highest degree of severity of all the Yisrei Torah. So maybe because the isser entails such a severe punishment, we need to have such strict safeguards. The Radbaz says there are many isurim in the Torah that are isur kares. Chelev, the forbidden fats of an animal, are also isur kares. You don't have to search for them. You don't have to burn it. You're allowed to own it. So it can't be because chametz has an isur kares. Then the Radbaz says, well, maybe it's because you're not allowed to get hana from chametz. And since you're not allowed to get hana from it, as opposed to other isurim, which you're allowed to get benefit from, we have to be very strict in terms of the safeguards. And to that, the Radbaz says there are many isurim in the Torah that are also isurei hana. Let's say a shor haniskal, an animal that violates a certain avera. The animal is asur b'hana, and nevertheless we don't have these safeguards. Maybe, says the Radbaz, the reason is because since we eat chametz the whole year, and we're so used to it, we have to be extra careful on Pesach, lest the person stumble and eat it. So therefore we have all these safeguards. Says Radbaz, there are many Yisurim that are mutter the rest of the year. You have Chadash, you have other Yisurim, and therefore the Radbaz sort of shrugs his shoulders, throws up his arms, and he says, there is no straightforward explanation to explain why chametz is so severe. And therefore the Radbaz has no alternative than to offer the following Kabbalistic approach. In other words, says Radbaz, there is no straightforward, simple way to explain why the Rebbeinu Shem is so machmer with chametz. This is the only explanation. And the Radbaz says as follows. There's a very important Gemara. The Gemara in Brachos Daf Yud Zayin. The Gemara over there is talking about how various Amoraim, at the conclusion of their Shmona Esrei, they would add personal bakashas to the conclusion of their Shmona Esrei. And the Gemara tells us there was an individual by the name of Rabbi Alexandri who would conclude Shmona Esrei in the following way. You have it on your sheet, it's number 6. Rabbi Alexandri, Basar de Mitzli Amar Hachi. Rabbi Alexandri, when he would finish davening, he would say the following. Riboin ha'olamim, Master of the universe, Galui v'yadua lefanecha. You know full well, Sheritzoinenu lasois ritzoincha, that it is our will to fulfill your will. Riboin Hashem, you know we want to do the right thing. So what's stopping us? Says the Gemara, 2 things. Sa'ar shebe isa v'shibud malchiyos. The yeast in the dough and the subjugation of the nations of the world. The latter we understand. We live in a Gentile environment. All of the attitudes that we confront, that enter our minds, that bombard us, are all antithetical to the Torah. And no matter what type of yeshiva education a person has, they are constantly being exposed to ideas that are against the Torah. And that is one of the 2 main things that take us away from serving Hashem. But what is number 1? The yeast in the dough. What does the Gemara mean that the yeast in the dough prevents us from serving Hashem? So, I get it. Friday night, you have a lot of challah, and you have such a sugar rush to your brain after eating so much challah, you're in a semi-comatose state by the time the meal is over. You can't move. And even though, there are a lot of good things you could be doing, you can't, right? Or you eat a donut, you shouldn't be allowed to drive, right? You can't even think anymore. All that yeast, all that sugar. Yeah, but obviously that's not what the Gemara means. What does the Gemara mean? Sa'ar shebe isa. Zakt Rashi, Sa'ar shebe isa, Yetzer hara shabilvavenu hichmitzanu. The yeast in the dough is a mashal, is an allegory to the Yetzer hara. If a person would just walk around meek, humble, so they don't feel deserving, they don't feel entitled, they don't need, they don't deserve. If somebody says something to them, so what? Who am I anyway? I don't deserve it, I don't need it. But all of a sudden, that Yetzer hara puffs you up to become, the most important creature on earth. How dare you? I have a right. I'm entitled. To me, that is ma'akiv number 1 in Avodas Hashem, the Yetzer hara, Sa'ar shebe isa. So, chametz is a mashal to the Yetzer hara. If I were to ask you, Who is, and you don't have to answer this question, who is your greatest enemy in this world? Your boss? We'll leave it at that. Who is your greatest enemy in the world? Says the Chayvus Havavais. There were a bunch of soldiers returning from war, returning from battle, and they were carrying the spoils of war in their hands. And they encounter a Chacham, and the Chacham says, you have returned from the small war, now you're ready for the great war. And they said, and what's the great war? That is the Yetzer Hara. Says the Chavos Havavos, Ben Adam, man, Roy L'cha Ladas, you should know, Ki hasoine hagadol sheyesh lecha ba'olam. Your greatest enemy in this world, who yitzracha is your Yetzer Hara. See, people don't understand. People think the Yetzer Hara just wants you to do an avera. No, the Yetzer Hara wants to kill you. He wants you dead. He wants you to do an avera, and then feel guilty about it, and then get depressed, and then not be able to do anything. The Yetzer Hara is not just a spiritual enemy. He's your enemy. The Gemara says, Rishayim Maleim Charata, the wicked are full of regret. So, wow, that's a big madrega. They regret all their averas. No, not that type of regret. They're full of guilt. Guilt is the Yetzer Hara. More than the avera, the Yetzer Hara wants you to feel bad, feel low, feel despicable, feel guilty. The biggest enemy that we have in this world is the Yetzer Hara. Chametz is the physical manifestation, representation of the Yetzer Hara. And therefore, says the Chidah, does anybody know how many names the Yetzer Hara has? 7 names. The Gemara in Sukkah Daf Nun Beis says. The Gemara in Sukkah says the Yetzer Hara has 7 names. What are they? Ra, Arel, Michshal, Tameh, Tzefaini. The Gemara says Yetzer Hara has many, many names. Evan. How many chumros are there when it comes to chametz? There's 7. Bedika, searching in the cracks and crevices. Bittul, Sreifa, Isser Kolshehu. You can't see it, you can't find it. The 7 chumros of chametz correspond to the 7 names of the Yetzer Hara. What does that mean the Yetzer Hara has 7 names? It means this Yetzer Hara has 7 different tactics to get a person to do an avera. Sometimes the Yetzer Hara puffs you up and makes you feel important. How dare they? I deserve, I'm entitled. And sometimes the Yetzer Hara says, you're going to do that mitzvah? You're nothing anyway. Who are you? You're Afar Ve'efer, Rima V'Taileya. You're a nobody. And the Yetzer Hara plays different cards. He knows which card to pull out at which time. There are 7 different techniques and eitzos of the Yetzer Hara. Corresponding to that, there are 7 different chumros of chametz. And therefore, because chametz, which is the Yetzer Hara, is so poisonous and so harmful and so dangerous and so toxic, we're not allowed to own the chametz. We're not allowed to look at the chametz. We have to burn the chametz. We're not allowed to see it. You have to get down on your hands and knees, take out that feather and wooden spoon, go into your radiator, and make sure that there's not even a tiny little crumb, because the smallest amount of Yetzer Hara is toxic, is poisonous, could destroy a person. There's nothing more terrible, disgusting, horrendous, poisonous than the Yetzer Hara.
So why not the whole year? We don't need it.
So that's the $1 million question. So if chametz is so terrible and so poisonous and so toxic, then what are we doing eating it 24 hours a day, 358 days a year? You know, chazer you can't eat the whole year, and chelav you can't eat the whole year, and basar v'chalav you can never eat. And here we're saying that chametz is the Yetzer Hara, so you can't see it, you can't look at it, you can't own it, you can't have hana. I mean, did anyone ever go into a rav with a leash? The rav said, what do you got there? I have a pig. You know, I don't know how I got it, but maybe you know a guy who wants to buy my chazer? Nobody ever came to me for mechiras chazer. Mechiras chametz? Even people will never say boo to a rabbi. All of a sudden, mechiras chametz? Oh, everyone's piling in. It's good, I'm happy, you know. But All of a sudden, it comes to Pesach, even the slightest degree, right? Nobody ever came to a Rav to buy basar b'chalav, chelev, gir hanosha. It's only chametz. And as terrible as it is, we consume it our entire lives, except for Pesach. So, how do you explain this dichotomy? On the one hand, the worst thing in this world is the Yetzer Hara, and on the other hand, we're eating it the whole year. Okay, you're sitting. You ready for this one? I came across an incredible Haggadah. The name of this Haggadah is Haggadah's Yad Mitzrayim of Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver. Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver is called the Peh Shlishi, the third mouth, meaning he's a Talmud of the Vilna Gaon. And he really is one who publicized and proliferated a lot of the Kabbalah and the teachings of the Vilna Gaon. He was a Rebbe of Menachem Mendel Mishkolov. And he takes an idea of the Arizal and he embellishes it and he runs with it. Here's the idea. That Klal Yisrael stay in Mitzrayim and Yetzias Mitzrayim is analogous to the pregnancy and incubation and birth of Klal Yisrael. So let's explain what that means. But this is the idea, and this is what we're going to try to develop in... How much time do we have?
10 minutes. 3 hours.
Between 10 minutes and 3 hours. Okay. Marav Rabbi Sai, we always have to start with the weather report. Okay? We always start with the weather. So it's on the 8th, right? It's right. Perfect timing. The Torah tells us that when Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim, Hayoim Atem Yoitzim B'chodesh Ha'aviv. You're leaving today, it's the springtime. Could someone tell me why the Torah begins the episode of Yitzchak with a weather report? Why do we need to know that we're leaving in the spring? What's the spring? Comes right after the winter. During the winter, all the trees die. All the leaves fall off of the tree. All the animals go into hibernation. The world is in a state of misa and death. And the spring is the rebirth of the world, the revitalization, the birth of planet Earth. So too, Klal Yisrael were wallowing in Mitzrayim. Physically, we were demoralized. We had a slave mentality. We have a low morale. Spiritually, we were on the 49th level of Tumah. Had we remained a moment longer, we would have fallen to the 50th level, the point of no return. And Hashem comes to Moshe Rabbeinu and he says, Moshe, guess what? Go tell the people that I've decided that they are going to be the recipients of the Torah, that in 49 days they're going to be raised up to the 50th level of Kedusha and be a Mamleches Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh. Say what? Imagine you go to the slums and you take the lowest of the low and you say in 50 days you're going to become... Yeah, I don't want to use other countries. But you're going to become the ruler of the world. Say, what are you talking about? You got the wrong guy. How are we going to do it? How are we going to lift ourselves up physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually to carry out this great mission of the Rebbeinu Shalom? Well, says Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, Mitzrayim was considered like the embryo, the uterus of the Jewish people, the rechem, the place where the Rebbeinu Shalom selected that Klal Yisrael should develop and ultimately be reborn. In fact, Mitzrayim is called Ervas Haaretz. The Mitzrayim are compared to Chamoirim, Besar Chamoirim Besaram. Mitzrayim is considered the lowest land in the world. Mitzrayim, it says, Kemase Eretz Mitzrayim Loisasa. Says Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, for an embryo to develop properly, it develops in a dark, cramped, ma'os place. And therefore, there was no nation in the world, no country in the world, no location in the world that fit the bill to be the seat of the development of this embryo named Klal Yisrael. Well, it says Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, pregnancy has 3 trimesters. So too, there were 3 stages in the development of Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim. So when we first came down, Yaakov Avinu came down, the brothers came down. It wasn't even noticeable that we were enslaved. Somebody who saw us in Mitzrayim would think we're on vacation, we're in Goshen. Nobody would know that we're an embryo, that Mitzrayim, the host mother, was pregnant. Nobody could tell. Like a woman in the first trimester, where it's not recognizable, it's not noticeable that she's in this condition. What happened next? Vayakam el chadash al Mitzrayim. Hava neschak malai. Things began to get very difficult for Jewish people. We became enslaved. They tortured us. They afflicted us. The second trimester, it's noticeable already. Everybody knows. Things become more difficult. It becomes harder to walk. It becomes harder to do household activities. The second trimester of Klal Yisrael Mitzrayim was when Paroi rose, Vayakam el chadash al Mitzrayim, until the birth of Miriam. Does anybody know, from the birth of Miriam until we left Mitzrayim, how long was that? 86 years. Very good. 86 years. Gematria, Kais. Kais. Kos. Same thing. Right? Kaf, Vav, Samach. 86. Right? 86. By the way, how long were we supposed to be in Mitzrayim? 430. Really, we only were enslaved 86 years, which is what? 1/5. One series of 86, instead of 5 series of 86. So we drink the 4 kaisais, each kais takes us out of another 86 years they were supposed to have been in Mitzrayim. The final 86 years were torture. They took our babies, they threw in the Nile, they built it into the river. Life was impossible, it was so painful. Rebbeinu Shem, so to speak, squeezed 430 years worth in the last 86 years. But just like the third trimester, the inexperienced mother thinks that the more painful it is, the longer it will be, it's going to last forever. But the experienced mother knows the more pain and the more intense the labor pain, the closer you are to the end. So too in Mitzrayim. The Rebbeinu Shem needed us to be there 430 years. But he squeezed 430 years worth in order to get us out early. We know on the Pasuk, Vayimaru es chayehem. What's the trop on Vayimaru es chayehem? Kadma v'yazla. Vayimaru es chayehem. What's the gematria of Kadma v'azla? 190. Because of Vayimaru es chayehem, the Rebbeinu Shem Kadam, he took us out early, va'azal, and he pulled us out. How long? 190 years early. So the more the pain, the more intense the pain, the sooner we were leaving. The third trimester, that was the third trimester of Mitzrayim. The first Makkah of Mitzrayim was Makas Dam. Says the Gemara, in Psichas HaKever B'loi Dam. That's the first symptom. For labor and delivery. Listen to this. Look at number 18. V'hoisa tze'aka gedoyla b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. Asher kamayu lo niyasa v'chamayu lo soisef. There will be a great cry in Mitzrayim. That never was there like that, and never will there be like that. Who cares? What's the Torah trying to tell me? That the scream was so loud. And let's say one person one time screamed a little louder. What's the message? What is the Torah trying to convey? That this was the loudest all-time scream. Who screams louder than anybody else? Now that's if you're having one kid. Imagine if you're having, we have an 11-pounder, right? What if you're having twins? What if you're having triplets? What if you're having 10? What if you're having an entire nation? Says the Torah, if you look in the Guinness Book of World Records, what was the most amount of people ever born at one time? 600,000, Yetzias Mitzrayim. That is why the Torah emphasizes it's incredible. You know, in the Haggadah, the Rebbeinu Shem emphasizes the fact, remember this? V'avarti v'eretz Mitzrayim b'layla hazeh, ani v'loi malach, ani v'loi saraf, ani v'loi shliach, ani v'loi acha, ani hu, ani. So in case you didn't know who did it, the Rebbe Shalom tells us in the Haggadah like 90 times, it was me, nobody else. Like who else was going to do it? And the answer is very simple. The Rebbe Shalom has many malachim. Hashem has millions of malachim at their disposal. And any good boss knows the key to successful operation is you have to delegate. And the Rebbe Shalom delegates. There's Gabriel, there's Michael. So why in the world is Rebbe Shalom saying, it was me, it was me, it was me? Why was it him? Why did he have to do it? Says Rabbi Glatstein because we know there are only 3 things in this world that the Rebbe Shalom maintains, the sole possession of these keys, that nobody else has any control of when these things happen. For example, the rain, the Gemara says in Tainus. The rain. That is a key that only Rebbe Shalom, nobody knows when it's going to rain. Everybody knows that if they report it's going to rain, it's 50-50 if you even need an umbrella. Right? If they say there's going to be a storm, 24 inches, if you get 6 inches, they hit it on the nail. Nobody knows when the rain falls. That's the key only in the Rebbe Shalom's hand. What's the other key? Tchias HaMeisim. One day when we wake up, we're going to know it's the Rebbe Shalom who brought us back. But the third key that the Rebbe Shalom maintains sole possession of, that nobody could say no, and nobody could say yes, and nobody could say it is possible, and nobody could say it's impossible, only the Rebbe Shalom. And therefore, says Rabbi Glatstein, why did Yetzias Mitzrayim have to be Ani v'loi Malach, Ani v'loi Shliach, Ani v'loi Saraf, not Michal, not Gabriel, not Amalch? Because this was the Leida, this was the birth of Klal Yisrael, and this is a key that the Rebbe Shalom maintains sole possession of. This is not a job that he delegates to anybody else. Comes the night of the Seder, and everybody knows that when a baby is born, the first couple of hours are critical, are crucial. The Gemara says on Shabbos, there are 7 activities that you're allowed to do for a baby. Even on Shabbos, you're allowed to be Mechalo Shabbos, because if you don't take care of the baby in its first few hours and first few days on this world, it's a very dangerous situation. You're setting the tone. You're preparing the child for its entire life. These hours, the first hours after birth, are critical to the entire future of the child. And therefore you're allowed to boil water on Shabbos and you're allowed to swaddle the baby. And everybody knows as soon as a baby is born, there are all kinds of activities. They give you about 30 seconds and they whisk the baby off. They vaccinate the child, they drop, they suction out the lungs. There are all kinds of things that are taking place. And then the baby gets a little older, you take it to the doctor once a month, once a year, and then nobody wants to go anymore. What's so special about, because that sets the tone for the rest of the life of the baby. It's the first few moments of life which are so critical. The night of the Seder is like the first hour after birth. All of the mitzvahs, the 12 mitzvahs maasiyos, the 64 expanded mitzvahs, are the critical activities that we have to perform, which will give us the strength and endurance and protection and spiritual stamina to exist the entire lifespan of a Yid. That is why the Leil Seder has more mitzvahs than any other time of the year. The same way, there are more activities done to the child when the child is born. The night of the Seder is the Laila of the Leida of Klal Yisrael. The rest of the year, we don't have a problem with chametz. I remember my grandfather told me that he had a mashgiach in yeshiva in the 1930s in the Bronx. His name was Reb Zadel Epstein. Yeah?
He's on the east side also.
In the east side? Giving away your age, right? But I went when I was in Eretz Yisrael, so I went to visit him 85 years after he told my grandfather. So my grandfather used to say that the mashgiach would tell the boys that a bacher in yeshiva has to play ball. So, well, why do we have to play ball? No. Because you can't starve the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is a force to reckon with. You can't starve it. If you starve it, it will come out elsewhere. Yetzer Hara is very important. The Gemara says in Masechta Yuma that the Anshe Knesset Agdola, when they were mevatel, the desire for Avodah Zarah, they figured, let's just get rid of the Yetzer Hara entirely. And the Gemara said the world fell apart. Nothing worked anymore. The Gemara said nobody had any initiative. Everything was just sluggish. Everybody needs a little Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara fuels the activities of a person. And we're able to deal with the Yetzer Hara. You're able to balance it. We're able to slide with the Yetzer Hara. But that's the rest of the year. Because the rest of the year we're mature. The rest of the year we've already developed. However, the night of the Seder, everybody knows, if you have a kid and part of their dinner falls on the floor and nobody's looking, you blow it, you make believe you wash it, and you put it back in the way. You're not cooking another supper. What if the baby's a year old and the bottle's been out for 25 minutes? It's okay. But a newborn, if anybody looks at that bottle, it has to be burnt. It has to be, you take an atomic bomb, you destroy it, and you go out and you buy a new one that nobody ever looked at. Nobody even thought about it. Because a baby is very vulnerable. A baby is very susceptible. Everything has to be completely sterile. Everything has to be pure. There can't be any chance of something entering the baby's system that doesn't have the resistance for yet. The rest of the year, we all need a little chametz. A little Yetzer Hara never hurt anybody. But the night of the Seder, we have not developed yet the resistance, the maturity, the spiritual wherewithal to be able to cope with the Yetzer Hara. The night of the Seder, the moment of birth, we cannot have even a crumb. We cannot have an iota. It's not even batel be'elef. If you see it, you have to burn it. You have to be mevatel it. You can't look at it. You can't own it. You have to search for it because the night of the Seder is the night of Leda. Every little crumb is toxic. Says Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, this is Oyam B'Noya. You take a look at the two words, chametz and matzah. They both have a mem. They both have a tzadi. The only difference between chametz and matzah is chametz has a ches and matzah has a hey. Matzah has that little opening. That's the Pesach Haleda. That represents how the Ribono Shel Olam gave birth to Klal Yisrael. We were born through matzah. Matzah created Klal Yisrael allegorically. That is the sustenance, that is the source, that is the root, that is the shoresh of Klal Yisrael. And every single year when we consume that matzah, the Ribono Shel Olam is recreating each and every one of us for the entire year. So let me be the first to wish you all Mazel Tov on your upcoming birth. So, just very briefly, what does this mean? What is the concept that Klal Yisrael is born on Pesach? And very simply, we have the Manishtana Halayla Azem Mikol Halaylos. What exactly is this question? Why is this night different? It's very different. And the Abarbanel identifies very clearly, what is the question of the Manishtana? We know when Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim, we crossed the sea, and we crossed the desert, and we were sick, and we got out of prison, so we met all four requirements of someone who has to bring a carbon toida. And a carbon toida has chametz loaves and matzah loaves. And yet the night of the Seder, the carbon Pesach only has matzah. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylos. Why is this carbon different from any other carbon toida? So what's the answer to the question? Says the Chassam Sofer, the answer to the question is, carbon Pesach is not a carbon toida. There's only one carbon that has no chametz brought with it. The carbon that we bring on the 8th day of the Miluim that inaugurates the Beis HaMikdash. It's called the carbon HaMiluim. The carbon Pesach is a carbon that inaugurates a Yid in his year-long Avodas Hashem. When we say that Pesach is the birth of Klal Yisrael, this is the beginning of our year of Avodas Hashem. This is what ushers in our year of Avodas Hashem. This is the inauguration of our Avodas Hashem. So we should take advantage of these ideas to try to integrate into our minds a little bit the concept of how careful we are from chametz, because this is really the beginning of our year, and whatever was last year and whatever was in our past doesn't matter. This is a new rebirth. It's a new opportunity to rejuvenate ourselves, to energize ourselves to focus on our Avodas Hashem. The Yibam Shem gives us new capabilities and new kaichos. We have a tradition, the Chassam Sofer brings down from the Maser Rekeach, that the third Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt on Pesach. But we have a little dilemma, because we will not be able to be mechanech on Pesach, because there's a rule, ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. Luckily, there are only 7 free days in Nisan that are not occupied yet. The last 7 days of Nisan from Chav Gimel and on are reserved for the chinuch of the third Beis HaMikdash, Sheyibanav Imher V'Yameinu. We should taka b'zoicha that as we have our personal chinuch this Yom Tov, we should be zoicha to see the Chanukah of the third Beis HaMikdash, Imher V'Yameinu. Amen. Chag Kosher Sameach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.